Welcome back to Account Management Secrets. Today's going to be a fun conversation with a friend of mine, Robert Sproule, who I've known for a couple of years, currently VP of Account Management at SafetyChain Software. And this is going to be really interesting because there's a lot that I don't know about food safety and about all the infrastructure and things that go behind this very mission critical, super important area. This is the kind of space where you probably never hear about this when things are going well. And yet when they don't go well, there's some kind of problem with food safety or hygiene. We all hear about it like right away. So I'm excited to get into that with Robert today. And what we're also going to be learning is, a lot of the tactics and the day-to-day stuff that Robert does to run his organization and keep his customers happy and satisfied and make sure he's hitting his numbers. So we are going to roll up our sleeves a little bit and talk about that as well. So plenty ahead for you in this episode of Account Management Secrets. Let's get in. If you're an account manager, you already know this. You're the one keeping the business running. You own the client relationships, drive the revenue, and solve the tough problems for your customers. But here's the challenge. Most companies don't give account managers the training or recognition they deserve. That's what you'll get here on the Account Management Secrets podcast. I'm Alex Raymond, and after working with thousands of account managers, I know what separates the best from the rest. In this show, we cover exactly what you need to succeed: handling tough client conversations, driving renewals and upsells with confidence, and proving your value every single day. There's no fluff, no outdated sales tactics, just real practical strategies you can use right now to grow your accounts and build a successful career. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit subscribe and let's get into it. Robert, great to see you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, as I just said, there's a lot of things that I am unaware of when it comes to food safety. I'll admit it's not a thing I think about very often unless things pop up in the news. You've been doing this for a long while. So you're at SafetyChain now. You used to be at a company called Steritech where you were a strategic account manager. So you've got many, many years in this space. What is it that we all need to be aware of when we're talking about food safety here?
Well, rest assured, we've got the safest food in the world here in North America. We've got some really strong systems that are in place. And with the people that I work with, they have really stringent requirements. And for the most part, what you'll see is that there are requirements that the government advises, regardless of what country you're in. And most of industry are going to go way beyond what those require and have best practices that are way beyond that. In very basic terms, when you're cooking food at home, keep hot food hot, keep cold food cold, and you're going to be just fine. Like I said, right away from manufacturing, they have things called critical control points, and these are the places within their operations that certain things have to be done, and if they're not done, then the food is either discarded, rejected, or not allowed to be sold to consumers. They also do an awful lot of product testing. So before that food is released and customers are able to purchase that in grocery stores or elsewhere or in restaurants, there are a lot of checks that have been done on that food. So the main thing for us as consumers is have confidence in what we're eating. And today there's more choice than ever. And I think we see more certifications around things like organics, GMO-free food, all that. We've got so much more choice today than we ever have in history. These are tough, complex problems for manufacturers to solve. And for us as consumers, it may seem very straightforward, but there's an awful lot that's happening behind the scenes that manufacturers are doing to make sure that food is safe and that they're following the right protocols. And then if we expand that, a lot of our customers have an awful lot of facilities around the world, and they're doing exactly the same thing in all of those facilities to such a high standard. Mm-hmm. What this produces, Alex, is a massive amount of data, billions of points of data, and they're looking for those sort of one or two things within that data that can help them run a better operation. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of totally gone a little bit more than just the food safety side. It does impact within operations, and like an awful lot of businesses, that relationship between quality, between operations is so vitally important. Operations are so focused on getting the right amount of food out the door. Quality are making sure that that food is safe, that it meets the right standards, and that it's the right weight, that from a regulatory standpoint, they can stand around that. And
So
then
help me understand who's a typical customer. What are the kinds of organizations you're working with? Are these the sort of, Cargill and just these gigantic multinational companies, or are these more local brands, or what sort of what's the customer dynamic look like?
Yeah, we have both. We work with local businesses. We work with large multinational organizations. For whenever you're going to the grocery store, you're going to be buying food that are utilizing SafetyChain as their quality management system, and whether that's fruit, veg, protein. We're working in all of those spheres. We only work with food and beverage manufacturers. We don't do anything in automotive or in pharmacy or anything like that. So we are very focused on what we're doing. But these are large organizations that, for the most part, they make up about 80% of our revenue. And then we have smaller local businesses that some folks that are only one location today, and in the future they may open more. They may be happy with just one location. That might be what they're doing. They all need the right systems in place. They still all got to show to regulators that they're doing the right thing at the right time, and that they've got in our case, digital proof that they have done that correctly. And that's what really help them streamline their operations. Audits are a natural piece of life for them, Alex. So they'll have these audits that are occurring multiple times a year. In some plants, they will have somebody that's dedicated to hosting an auditor upwards of 40 times a year. And by utilizing a system like SafetyChain, they're able to expose those records that auditor needs to see to be confident about using it, about meeting the requirements. And doing that frees up so much of their time, both from a preparation standpoint and from an execution standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it takes about 2 or 3 weeks for somebody that's utilizing paper to get all of those records together. We're going back to the days where we had those binders and boxes of binders. It can be a really time-consuming process. And frankly, It's an enjoyable process. What we're really trying to do is free people up from being the data collectors to being able to solve problems within their business. That is much more exhilarating for humans to do. And frankly, some of the times the human beings aren't the best data collectors.
Now, tell me about your account management philosophy. So in this highly regulated environment, very high stakes, how do you think, so you're the vice president of account management. How do you think about this motion? How do you think about the entire post-sales experience that you want your customers have? How do you measure whether you're doing a good job or not? Like, just give us an overall sense of the umbrella that you're putting this under.
Yeah, really good question. So from a commercial standpoint, we want to make sure that we've got the right terms for moving forward. And we have some legacy contracts which end up just being really tough place for us from a financial standpoint. We've invested an awful lot in a relationship, and that's not necessarily reflective in a contract for those. There's some tough conversations that need to be had whenever it comes to the time of talking renewal. But we don't want that renewal to be the first time that we're talking to a customer. I think engagement's really, really important, particularly at that start of a relationship. We've agreed this body of work that we're going to do together. Somebody in the executive room has made a really good decision about moving forward with SafetyChain. They've handed us off to another group of folks. Now they're going through implementation. We want to make sure that whole process of implementing our software is stellar and they're getting the right level of customer success. But from an engagement point of view at account management level, I go back to one of your previous guests. I think it's Greg Danes, and he talked a lot about their results and orienting around results. What does success look like for our customer, and how do we measure that? This is somewhere that we've just found AI has been so helpful for us. And when we think about those results, frankly, Alex, we just had a really hard time understanding the value of our software. We knew directionally where we were helping customers save. They were saving on paper. They were no longer having to buy that paper. They were saving on labor hours. We just didn't know how much. And saving on the um, the time that it takes to prep for an audit. And again, we just didn't quite know how much. How does this all fit together? So what becomes really important for us is, when are you starting to realize your first dollar of saving? When is that ROI occurring? And then secondly, what does that look like over the course of a year? Because one of our customers told me a couple of weeks ago, every year I got to go and re-justify how much I'm spending on SafetyChain. They want me to go to SAP. Why can't you go to SAP? Well, SAP is a very wide and broad system, and SafetyChain is a much more specific quality solution. So we're very specific at what we're doing, and much more user-friendly from an interface standpoint. But he still has to go to a group of an IT team that they don't know the ins and outs of our solution, and he's got to justify that. If we've armed him with, here's what we anticipate the ROI is, and this is why it is that, then he has a much better business case for being able to do that. So we want to make sure that executive level, that we're arming our executives to have those internal conversations. We work typically with the food safety quality team. We have limited involvement from the IT, but that's the sort of question they're asking. Why are we spending this amount of money on SafetyChain? And then it continues around that relationships piece. And I'm a big believer in having the right cadence of engagement with our customers. We host a couple of executive roundtables every year where we're looking at our VP and above level customers that are interacting with our CEO directly and talking about what's happening in the industry, what challenges are they facing. They're learning from peers. They're not getting into the nuts and bolts of how they're using SafetyChain. The group that are our directors, managers, they're getting into some of that at our annual customer summit. And then on a month-to-month basis, we're looking at these executive results reviews. And this was really inspired by Greg. It was how do we come to a number that we can both align on and say, this is what we think that we're saving you. And for the customer, they may not agree with it, but we'll show them all the math behind it, and we'll let them say, okay, well, if we adjust this and this, then we can come to a number that we...
Well, that sounds pretty juicy. I mean, for sure, the Greg Danes podcast is really a reframing for a lot of people on how they think about customer value. And one of the things that always struck me from that conversation with Greg was him saying, all you need to do is show the first marginal dollar of improvement. Yeah. So it could be, so it's literally, it doesn't have to be $1 million. You just need to show we're $1 better off, either by more revenue or less cost than we were before. And that's a great way to start the conversation and then start to justify the ROI. So tell us more. Like, I want to get into this because it's a very common issue that people have. The customer buys some initial use case and everyone's all excited, but then by year 2 or year 3 or year 5 or sometimes year 10, you're kind of embedded as the status quo, and the customer forgets, why are they here? What are they doing for me? Can I live without them? Can I chase the next shiny object, right? Or, that's promising something different. And so having a really good process with your customers to remind them of the value you're providing and how much worse off they would be without you is therefore a really good idea. So tell us about how you actually implemented this and what does it look like?
Much of that is driven by our customer success team as well. Part of their role is to be engaging with our customers week to week, month to month basis. And we're reliant on a positive relationship with the customer success team so that we can expose ourselves to those customers and find out, what would it mean to you if you didn't have SafetyChain? What difference would that make to how you run your business, and what impact would that have at the end? And they need a little bit of coaching through that, or a few questions to be asked. I love asking questions, so it's a great opportunity to, well, what would happen then? And what would be the impact of that? And if you didn't have all of this captured on a digital system, where would it be captured? And it'll be on Excel. And how much time would it take to pull all those reports together? And now you've got to show them to your customer. How much time would you spent doing that? And you add up all of this time, and it ends up that somebody says, oh gosh, my job would go back to being what it was 5 years ago whenever I had to do this in paper. And I was so glad to get away from that because now I'm solving the challenges within the business. And I think that's one piece that's a little bit tricky and more subjective for us to measure, but we do ask the questions around it. What continuous improvement projects have you run over the last X number of months that you identified because you saw something in SafetyChain that alerted you to having a problem or that you needed to improve something? So aside from all of these other things around saving time with labor and saving paper costs and saving time to prep for audits, there's this, our business is getting better because we can more quickly observe data. And for our customers, it becomes a validation. We had a customer that we sat in front of that they were spending less than $100,000 with us. And we were able to, with them, show them $6 million worth of savings. And it really validated for them what the work they were doing. They had those savings because of them, not because of us. We were the vehicle for them getting there. But when they saw that, these big grins were on their face, and they were telling us to adjust some numbers because we were under selling what they were.
Yeah.
So when we were able to get to a number, it's like, can we go and tell your bosses? And we'd really like it if you did. So they took us out to their boss. We showed it to their boss, and he wasn't at all surprised. He was like, yeah, we love what these guys are doing for us. This is really important stuff, and it's making our operations better. And they know, the executives know, and sometimes it's really just hard to know why, but they know their business is better because they've got a solution like SafetyChain, selfishly that they have SafetyChain, but they don't always know why. And when we're able to help them understand that, then that's what helps them to talk about it more succinctly and more accurately with their other executive leaders. And whenever they hear about one of their executive leader friends having a challenge somewhere else, well, maybe you should speak to SafetyChain. So we've had doors open because of that. There's some of those that we just can't do anything with because they're not in our, and we don't support that type of solution. But it's still a great way for us to influence other people within the organization.
That's really cool. So I want to highlight a couple of things that I heard here, and then make sure that our audience is getting this as well. So when you do these value reviews with a customer, what do you call them, by the way?
It depends. So executive results review is what we're doing in 5 to 10 minutes. We don't. Okay. I like 15-minute meetings, Alex. I don't like throwing across a 30-minute meeting to one of our customers who's always busy, and I don't have time for you in 30 minutes. So I look for a 15-minute spot. And if we can get a 15-minute spot and I just want to take 10 minutes with you, and I want to tell you where I think we are, and for you to then.
That's dynamite. That's fantastic. So it's a quick meeting. I like the phrasing executive results reviews, because what executive doesn't want to look at their results? And so that's got really great framing to it. And I heard you say, look, like the default stuff is how much time did you save and how much less paperwork is there, and sort of the hard cost. And a lot of account managers will stop there. They'll say, great, you used to have all these costs. Now you don't have these costs. So we're going to declare success. But then you went on to say, how can we track this back to continuous improvement within the organization?
Yep.
And this comes back to an idea that I talk about, which essentially I call solve bigger problems. Like account managers need to go solve bigger problems for your customers. You can't stay in the box, because your customer is always going to have a box of who you are and what you do. And your job is to break out of that box and to go upstream and say, what's really going on here and how can we solve a bigger problem for you? And you're saying we try to link back value to the continuous improvement. So how else has their business got better? Now, it may not be directly because of your product. It may just be an indirect benefit, but it's still a really worthwhile exploration. And then you said, we want to focus on why. People know things are getting better, but they don't necessarily know why. And so that's an element of curiosity, right? Radical curiosity to say, why are things getting better? And so you're implementing this stuff. Presumably, you're then helping people to make connections that they hadn't previously made. You're helping them to see things because you're the experts in food quality and these audits. They don't know as much as you do probably about some of the mechanics here. So you're really able to have a different conversation with them. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and there's a lot smarter people than me in SafetyChain and more specific into some of these continuous improvement items that we'll actually have somebody that can come on site and help to start measuring it, show them how to measure it, and build a case that they can then present internally that we can use for our own marketing purposes. It's really, really effective. So these continuous improvement coaches, they are industry people that know the language. Often, sometimes in these plants, I'm hearing something, I'm just not quite sure what they're saying, so I have to have them reframe it in a way that I'll understand. But the industry person standing beside me is like, "Oh, you're an idiot. This is what they were saying." Oh, okay, thanks, got it for next time. But they're really, really good at finding that value. We've got a young lady on our team, and she can go in and find savings in every single plant that she's been to. That even if for our customer, like they get so focused on what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I describe it as drift. They just drift away from what their norm should be. And having somebody like Tiffany on our team coming in, observing what they're doing, helping them get back to that equilibrium, using the data. So it's a data decision. Here's the data piece. I referenced earlier, they're seeing millions of pieces of data. They need to pull out the right pieces of data. Part of our responsibility is taking them there. How do we get you to that right piece of data that's going to make your business better? But if they are, I'll just give you a really simple example here. If we've got a customer that they've got to rate from a regulatory standpoint, they've got to meet their minimum weight requirement. What they typically do is put in a lot more. But then now they've got an issue of overfill and consistency. A customer becomes more expectant of, well, I normally get more than this, so I always want more than this. So now this is a customer complaint issue. And also, we can't make as many pieces that we were meant to make because we've put too much into the ones that we have made. Getting them back to the equilibrium, back closer to what that regulatory number is, that 1, 2, 3% improvement in yield over the course of a year is millions of dollars of savings.
Got it. Well, I mean, this is great because you're giving us a framework that we can immediately go start to do, right? So go do the executive results reviews. Make that a part of what you're doing. You said in the intro earlier that AI had been an important part of your strategy and approach, and you've been an Amplify member. So you're in the Amplify community. You've been there for several months, and you actually did a cool showcase with us back in the spring on how you're using AI. Specifically, it was for account planning. I assume there are other kind of examples. And by the way, this is one of the things I love the most about Amplify is sharing, with one another to see what people are actually doing. So you had shared for our group how AI is making you better at account planning. Tell us more about that and tell us how else you're using AI.
Yeah, but before I go there, I do want to say that Amplify has been hugely helpful for me. My journey had taken me back to being an individual contributor last year, and as I moved back into an executive role, there were a lot of things that weren't in place that we were building from the ground up. And you referenced account plans. The first place I went for account planning tools was Amplify. And some gracious members there had shared some of their best practices and other materials that I was able to utilize those as a really helpful starting point for me. So that's been hugely helpful. Second thing I just wanted to wrap up from the last piece of the conversation we're having, the executive results review, I see that as living within the calendar of events that we're doing on an annual basis. Executive results reviews, QBRs, and then top to tops, how do we connect all of the right people at the right times? Transitioning over to AI, love AI. Two of the biggest things that have been impactful for me this year. Number one is having new people join the team who have brought a fresh perspective on things. And it comes back to something you mentioned earlier, Alex, about why? When team members join us that haven't been part of the industry, they ask great questions. Well, why do you do that? And why do we do that? That's a great question. The second thing they do is they're very quick in telling us, this seems really time consuming and low reward. Why do we have to spend so much time on this? And that's what I've utilized for AI for, is what are some of the things that we're asking our reps to do that is taking them a lot of time and isn't necessarily getting the right output out of it, that they aren't focusing on the right thing. And it's back to the core problem we're solving for our customers is we're trying to free up time so you can solve problems. Want to do the same thing for our account management team. And where that's really been helpful is for AI, for our account plans. We help get some of that general information about our customers and prospects that would automatically populate into their account plans. And then for them to come over the top of that and be able to strategize, think about how they're doing that. We've also new reps. They don't always know the talking points from SafetyChain. They can practice with other people in SafetyChain. They can practice with AI. They use AI to do their role playing. And it's really helpful for account management going into those contract renegotiations or renewals. I got to deliver a 15% price increase to such and such. And this person isn't always been a fan of ours, and give the persona to the chat GPT or whatever agent being used, tell them a little bit more about it, and then do the role play. Now, I will say that at times AI tends to be a little bit kind to us as the users. Yeah. So it's really worthwhile following that up with, what could I have done better? If you were being really critical about that, what would have been the 2 or 3 things that I should have addressed differently than I did this time? But I think that's massively helpful. I talked about the executive results reviews. We have an ROI estimator. We use AI for that. It takes us less than 2 minutes to be able to get that number that we can then speak to a customer about. It even gives us a lovely graph at the bottom that if we want to share that graph with the customer, there's something that we can send to them afterwards if they're wanting to share that within their organization, which selfishly we want them to. So we're trying to put that all in their hands. And then we had a project around, and I think I'd shared this with you before, Alex, around how do we make the template for renewals simpler? And as we went through that process, it turned out that we were negligible in what we were doing in AI. It was marginally making it better, but it wasn't a big enough return for us to say this is a massive success. That one is still a work in progress. We've got a couple of our reps that are continuing to help us to figure out how do we make that easier for them, but then also give our CRO the confidence that he doesn't need to review every single contract that's going out there. So there will be time savings on it, but we just haven't quite got that one across the finish line. I'm fortunate to work for a company that has a champion for AI in the CEO role. So there are things that he holds very sacred, such as our customer data. We're not sharing any of that, but he is a big champion of AI, and it makes it easy for us to come to him and say, I had this idea about, and in fact, he pushes those initiatives out to us and asks us to make sure that we're building momentum around where can we use AI and what benefit does it have for our team.
Great. Yeah, I mean that's important stuff. It's, you don't want to have to pay the account management tax. So meaning doing too much busy work instead of spending time with customers. So it's great to use those tools. And on the account planning side, it sounds to me like you're using AI for the for the kind of the admin tasks. So things like research and what's the so many account plans are full of this data that you're kind of wondering, like, who cares, right? But so therefore you want to outsource this stuff to AI, like who's the client and how long have they been a customer, what industry are they in, and what's going on in their world and stuff like that. So a lot of that you're just absorbing via AI. And then the creative act of then saying, so how do we link this back to the customer's goals, and how do we create an alignment of actions and activities that we're going to do to help them get there? All that stuff is still the account manager is doing, but they're doing it with this assistance of the AI, having done a lot of the research and compiled the information. And if I remember correctly, like you're even able to pull, S1 data or annual review data, if your customer's public, for example, to really help make that simple, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's really helpful for us to see what tech stack does our customer have in place. Are they an SAP house? Are they an Oracle house? And that helps us from an integration stickability point of view. And as we think about how can we help this customer more than we are today, there's some nuggets that we can pull out of that. We also ask it, tell me one non-obvious thing about this customer. And it's interesting what that comes back with. And really, we added that question in to make sure that the reps were actually going all the way through validating and able to articulate it. We don't just want them to put this in AI and never look at it. That's not going to be useful for anyone. I think you sort of articulated 50% of what they're doing can now be done by AI, but they have to put that effort in around the strategy, around the engagement, and how are they going to progress what we're doing so that we're stickier, so that we know that renewal is secure, and so that we're expanding within our client base. Massively helpful though for identifying white space, particularly good with things like acquisitions. Acquisitions continue to happen in our industry, and when our reps are updating their account plans, which we do see those being living and breathing and being updated on a monthly basis. We did have one rep that came back and said, "Oh, I didn't know about this." So it highlighted something that wasn't obvious.
Oh, cool. All right. So it's scanning out there and it's able to tell you M&A activity, which is a huge deal. M&A activity is one of the biggest red flags out there for any account manager. Exactly. To be aware of some change in the corporate structure. So it's able to help you to identify that. And then you also said white space. And I'll just reflect here that one of the things that surprises me is how account managers often like shoot for a really low goal on white space. We sort of declare victory if we just renew at 100%, right? And that's flat, as opposed to thinking, how do I get this customer to double or triple or 10x with us, for example? And so presumably you can then have your AI tools really start to push the boundaries there for white space, because in every single one of your accounts, there's got to be white space.
Yeah, exactly. So we've built out, unfortunately, this is still in Excel, but we have built out a spreadsheet which has all of our customers listed. How many of the plants are we operational in? How many plants do they have total? Which parts of our solution are they using? Which parts are they not? There's one part of our solution that's being very limited in its use. Mm-hmm. That's a massive white space opportunity, and it's forming part of our strategy for 2026, which we're working on today, so that as we look into 2026, we're not just getting some of that white space for this year, but we've got angles to go to for 2026. A lot of that is predicated on the success that we have today. And I think that trust is the key word that we use in account management. We're the trustworthy salespeople, but we ultimately do want to expand our business with customers. We want to make sure they're seeing more and more value, and that we can continue that journey with them. And to what you just said, Alex, that we're doubling, tripling our revenue with them. It's our greatest source for growing our business is our existing customer base.
Yeah. How does that break down for you guys as a business? Like, without disclosing too much, like, how do you see, when you're putting your plan together for this year, for next year, how does that compare to where it might be? How are you pushing yourself? Are we now at a point where, there was this really interesting data from EBSTA that came out in the spring, and I had Guy Rubin on the show talking about the EBSTA data, and he said that in their data set from 2024, 52% of net new revenue was now coming from existing customers, which means that for the first time, existing customers are they've always driven more revenue, but now they're driving more new revenue than new customers. Is that the same for you?
It is. And we do really well at the land and expand. We do have some customers that will buy us in a full chunk, and that's great. We love that. But most of our customers are going to buy us in not necessarily a pilot, but in some scope that they have this big problem that they want to solve. And then as we get engaged with them, we learn about other big problems that they have and how can we help them solve those other big challenges. I think what we're seeing in tech in the last couple of years is this whole idea around consolidation. We also want to box out our competitors where they are. It makes it, there's a big total cost of ownership value for our customers. If they're using us, we've got 3 parts to our solution. If they use us for all 3 parts, then TCO is much better than if they're using us for one part, one of our competitors for another part, and a third competitor for the third part. So that's a big play in what we're doing. And actually, I just had one of our customers call me this morning. He said, "I know you've been talking to us over the last couple of years about replacing this company, but can you start talking to me about some numbers and why we should do this?" And I said, "Before we get there, let's talk about your total cost of ownership and what you need to support that other company that you're working with. What would it mean to you if you could consolidate on one platform, and how many people would you need to support that? And now he's able to start thinking about, it's not just this number of how much it's going to cost. It's also how much do I need to spend to put the staff onto these systems so that they know how they work. So lots of good opportunity around that. I don't think we've got one customer that we don't have any white space with. It's about finding it, it's about prioritizing it, and it's about showing the value to them and building that business case so that it goes back to exactly what you said earlier, that they're spending a small amount of money to get this massive return, and how quickly can they expect that to happen. And we're a much smaller spend than somebody like an Oracle or a SAP system. We're also a much quicker implementation. So I think those all work in our favor. We're quite CFO friendly. And again, I'll go back to AI and that role play. It helps us with that conversation as we're prepping for those conversations with more data-driven, financial metrics type people. Role playing that with AI can just be hugely helpful in knowing what to think about for those conversations.
Awesome. In wrapping up here, I want to come back to something I heard you mention earlier about you said that the customer success team is in regular contact with the customer, and you're getting a lot of information from them in order to build your plans and the cases for expansion, retention, and so on. There's a lot of debate around what's the difference between customer success and account management, and which way is up and who's who. And there's a lot of people stepping on toes, and there's a lot of there's not a lot of clarity in terms of what are the actual definitions of these roles. And so, just from your perspective as an N of one, right? Just to learn a little bit more about how you think about it. How is that set up for you guys? What's the structure between the two? How do you define the roles for account management and customer success?
We're very fortunate to have both great leaders and great people in our customer success team, and they report into our chief customer officer. Our account management team reports into our chief revenue officer. So we're divided from that part. The customer success managers are our greatest generators of pipeline for our account managers. So they need to make sure they've got great relationships with them, and they do. And that works both ways. The customer success managers, they want to know what's going on in the account. Part of their evolution, for some of them, it may be moving into an account management role in the future. So there's a level of them being keen to understand what that works. And some of them won't, because they see it and they're like, no, I don't want any part of that. But our account managers are, the way I very simply think about it is, our account managers are responsible for everything commercial. And if a renewal's at risk, then they need to be brought into those conversations if they're not already. And they should be talking to the people that the customer success managers are not speaking to. The customer success managers should be speaking to the administrators and those that are using it on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and help them get more value from it. They also do a great job at measuring value, interviewing customers, and then transitioning that across to account management whenever an opportunity opens up. I would say right the way up to our executive leadership team, both our chief customer officer and our chief revenue officer, both are very commercially minded. And so they are lockstep in what's happening, and they are in sync that these are two different roles, but they're complementary of each other, and they better all like each other, because they're going to be spending a lot of time figuring out how to support customers, make sure the customer's getting what they need, and then also that we're able to show that value and then realize that value when it comes to renewing those commercial terms.
That is a fantastic definition and a great way to put it. And I like the way that the roles are split and there's real clarity there. To me, that reinforces the value of each of the roles. And, I do like the focus that says account managers are the ones who are commercially minded. So that's really the main distinction as far as I've seen it. Well, hey, Robert Sproule, just want to say thank you for joining. This is a really great conversation to understand how you're seeing the world in this very high stakes business of food safety. Thanks for walking us through the executive results reviews, how you're using AI, and how you're thinking about a bigger white space in your account. Thanks so much for joining me here on Account Management Secrets.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. Keep up the great work.
Thanks.